I'm Christina Henderson, Executive Director of the Montana High Tech Business Alliance. Welcome to our webinar, What's All the Buzz? An Introduction to Clubhouse. This event is part of a series the Alliance is hosting with resources to help our members and communities. You can find details of these sessions at mthightech.org/events. We are pleased to welcome communications veteran Kelly Schwager today to introduce us to the exciting new Clubhouse app. Kelly currently serves as Vice President Global Communications for Oracle. Previously, Kelly served as Executive Vice President and General Manager for Edelman, the largest public relations firm in the world. Edelman Silicon Valley represented brands including Adobe, eBay, HP, GE, Juniper Networks, and Samsung. Prior, Kelly held various leadership roles with tech players, including SAP, Streetline, Symantec, Veritas, and US Web. Kelly works globally from her remote office in Columbia Falls and has been board chair of the Montana High Tech Business Alliance since 2019. We would ask if you would mute your microphones until you have something to say. If you have a question or comment during the meeting, feel free to share it, or you can type it into the chat as well. Today's presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to everybody who registered. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Kelly to get us started.
Excellent. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully this is a fun little topic for a Thursday afternoon. And as Christina said, if you have questions along the way, we do want to make this interactive. So don't hesitate to raise your hand, chime on in, post a little question to the chat. We do want this to be a conversation. And if there's time, we would love to actually pop over to the app and let everyone go over there and play with it over there after we talk a bit here. So if you don't have an invitation already to Clubhouse, we can certainly make that happen for you. So you can shoot a little note to Martina or post in the chat, and over the course of the conversation, we can make sure to get everyone that wants to check Clubhouse out in person. We can make sure to get you an invite. So what is all of the buzz? Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of buzz around Clubhouse. So the purpose of today is just to introduce everyone to what Clubhouse is, have a conversation in terms of the growth, what we're seeing, some of the competitive apps that are popping up out there, and just talk a little bit about how all of us can use these new audio platforms as part of the repertoire of communications tools. So Christina, if you want to jump into the first slide. So what is Clubhouse? There's certainly been a lot of buzz, and Clubhouse really has been around for a little while, but it's just been the last few months where it's really started to see a hockey stick of growth. Right now, the app is in beta, and so it's only open to iPhone users. They do intend to open it up to Android. It's not there yet. So for any of you with Android phones, you'll have to hold that thought and wait. For those of you with iPhones, we can certainly get you into the app with an invite, and you can check things out. Even though the app is in beta, the growth is pretty spectacular. So since probably mid last year, it's been invite only and has been growing exponentially over time. The numbers are even higher than 10 million now, but the last public count that Clubhouse put out there is 10 million users. So it's growing quite rapidly, definitely something to watch. This quote is pulled from one of the many articles on all things Clubhouse. And so it's kind of described as like a mashup of listening to a podcast while you're looking at Twitter. I personally, and it might date me a little bit, I personally liken it a little bit more to talk show radio, like where you're in your car, you're listening to a radio talk show, and you've got your host or guest, and you can call in and it's interactive. That's really the feel of Clubhouse. So it's audio only. It is a conversation. There is usually one person or multiple people that are steering the conversation, and it's usually centered around a particular topic, current events, kind of something that would spark a conversation and pull together a community that's like-minded around whatever the topic of the day happens to be. So how does it work? When we go into the app, we'll see a little more, kind of from a front row perspective, how the app really works. But just to describe it, if you haven't had a chance to play around, it's really like a series of chat rooms, or if we go back to my radio analogy, different stations, if you will. So these different clubs have been set up. They're sometimes hosted by an organization, sometimes they're hosted by a specific influencer, sometimes it's just a group of people that are really passionate about a certain topic. But you can find different rooms based on topics that you're interested in, kind of curate your own playlist, if you will. So the topics really range from fashion to technology to real estate, inclusivity, gaming, living in Montana. There's all different kinds of topics, and they try to help you sort through them. One little tip that I'll add is, as you're getting started on the platform, if you find people within your existing network, check out what clubs they're already following or people they're already following. It's a good place to start. Otherwise, day one, when you open it up, it can be a little bit overwhelming. The one other thing before we leave this area is, it is important to note that chat rooms can be private or public, depending on what you're using the app for. This is a good thing to call out. So if you are a company, for example, and you want to host a Clubhouse event, there is the ability to just make it invite only and private for the group that you would like to pull in, versus just broadcasting to the world, where anybody who happens to have the app open at that time can join. So next slide. All right. So what are the key things that you should know? First, nothing is saved or stored in the app. So the original intent of the founders was to create a forum where you could have a conversation and really kind of be open, honest, and have an authentic dialogue without fear of permanence. With that said, some of you may have noticed that recording is happening quite a bit. So do be conscious that there are reporters on the platform. Do be conscious that if it is a public event, there could be somebody in the quote unquote audience that is recording it and could post it, on another platform. So even though the terms say recording is prohibitive, it does happen. There are no brand pages available at this time. So if any of you are thinking about how can I use this for my company, so I currently wear the Oracle hat. There is not an Oracle page, but there are many employees and representatives of Oracle playing around on Clubhouse. We'll talk a little bit about where the platform is going, but at some point I expect that to evolve. But right now it's really set up for individuals. Metrics. So again, if you're looking at this from a marketing perspective, it's still really, really early days. And so the important thing is to go in there and, I think at this stage, experiment, play with it, understand that this is a pilot. There are not hard metrics just yet to really on the back end understand if you're reaching your audiences, if you're using this for a business tool, who is in your room, those kinds of things that you may want if you're looking at this from a business point of view. Finally, there's no advertising capabilities yet, but we will touch on some of the new offerings that Clubhouse is rolling out and testing that may be of interest if folks are interested in using the platform for more of a branding awareness kind of purpose. Next slide, Christina. So what is all the buzz? What are folks saying? There's a ton of media coverage on all things Clubhouse. So you can certainly read all about different reviews, what people are thinking, what people are saying, how people are using it. But I pulled a few different quotes that I thought would just be representative of some things to think about. So this first one, this is really for anybody who is like in a discussion around a topic and you just don't want it to end. That is Clubhouse. There are conversations that will go on for hours and hours, and then sometimes days. As the moderator, you can choose to time bound your conversation, or you can actually invite others to have moderator rights with you, and you can kind of pass the baton, if you will, and continue the conversation. If it's still going, even if the original moderator needs to drop off, you can pass the moderator rights to somebody else in the room to continue the discussion. So that one I thought was very, very relevant and true. This quote from The Guardian, the idea that it's like LinkedIn that talks to you. Watch this space. There's a lot of other social platforms out there that are really watching and learning from Clubhouse, and even starting to roll out their own audio only capabilities. And so that one, again, I think that there's going to be more of this type of offering out there. So definitely continue to watch it. And again, it is kind of like that idea of a conference, or finding kind of that like-minded community where you can get together and bounce ideas off each other, get different points of view, have an engaging conversation. So it's a lot of fun, and it can be very addicting. This last quote from a bootcamp article also was I think really a good representative of the differentiation of Clubhouse versus some of the other social platforms out there. The beauty of it being audio only is it does feel really authentic. It's not like a Facebook or an Instagram where it's very visual, if you will. This is really about the contributions that the individual participants are making, and the ideas being put forward, much more so than the gorgeous photo or the amazing, compelling video that's being shared. So it feels a little like more of like that intellectual challenge, if you will. There's folks that come in there and they debate, and you can tell they're passionate and knowledgeable about their topics, and so it makes for a very rich environment. Next slide. So what are the kind of the basics, the details? So as I already touched on, the platform is growing rapidly. The 10 million figure was the last published number, but it's likely much higher than that already. You can see that just between May of last year through April of this year, it is scaled quite significantly, and it's only continuing to gain momentum. Right now, there's about 2 million weekly active users. So just because there's 10 million people who've downloaded and kind of joined the Clubhouse community, if you will, on average, there's about 2 million people that are actively playing on the app at any given time. Still quite a pretty, a significant number, and not unusual to have that delta there. But that's another number that I think we can expect to see climb, particularly as different communities, like ours, look at how we can experiment with Clubhouse, how other, celebrities and et cetera, drive additional interest and kind of checking it out. So that's a number that I'm watching quite a bit. Currently, the app is ranked number 5 in the App Store, but again, watch this space. The buzz only continues to grow, and as all of us engage in the app, we all get invitations to be able to invite others to participate. So we are seeing that number climb quite a bit. So right now it's number 5, or when I made these slides, it was. It could be higher today. Finally, in terms of fundraising, they started off on a shoestring, and really over the last several months, their valuation has grown quite significantly. You can see that they've now joined the unicorns, being valued over $1 billion. So pretty significant growth in less than a year. The total funding raised is over 100 million, which again, pretty significant number. The team is still less than 30 people. So it's still a pretty small, startup-y sized company, but they're really looking to land grab and grow this thing fast. And so the recent round led by Andreessen Horowitz is certainly aimed at doing that. If you look at who's using it, it's everybody. So there's certainly influencers and thought leaders that are out there who've kind of helped to spark the initial interest in the platform. You have the celebrities. So you may have heard that Elon Musk has appeared a couple times and actually crashed Clubhouse with a couple of his conversations. Oprah has been seen playing around with it, Mark Cuban. But then there's also professionals. So real estate, seeing a ton happening from a real estate perspective, and realtors going on and talking about the market in different areas of the country and kind of connecting with people that maybe not be in their immediate community. And so that's been interesting to kind of observe how real estate professionals are using this to network with people outside of their idea or their areas. Also people in groups around, like Chamber of Commerce, economic development. You're seeing some of those types of groups, and a very interesting kind of swapping of ideas for small businesses as they try to reopen, post COVID, and swapping ideas with people in other parts of the country about how they're approaching it. So it's been interesting to watch that space, the smaller businesses and individual industries or sectors, how they're using it. I put on here, who is the first Clubhouse influencer. It's kind of fun to go pop and observe what Sheil has done, because Sheil's been on the platform for so long. There's a very interesting guests that often appear in the conversations that are moderated by Sheil, in terms of some of the new things that are coming up, like this invite-only creator pilot that's currently happening. Some of these early influencers that adopted the platform early are really helping Clubhouse to figure out, how can this be monetized? YouTube has turned into a platform where many people are making a living on YouTube. Instagram, same thing. And so there's a lot of conversation and activity happening around these pilots and with these early influencers, kind of figuring out what that business model is, not only for Clubhouse, but also for anyone who's contributing content and pulling together communities to have conversations on the platform. Next slide. So what are the features? So these are some of the terms that you'll either hear or see within the app. So the hallway, if anyone has the app on your phone, you can open it up. Otherwise, I'll do my best to kind of show you. But the hallway is kind of like this first, oh, that's not going to work at all. It's the very first thing you see as you open it up. So think of it as your main feed. It will show you which rooms are active. You can kind of scroll through it, kind of like a TV guide or scrolling through the radio stations, and get a sense of what conversations are happening right this very minute. There's also a calendar feature where you can see what's coming up later. This is great because you can check things out and you can actually add them to your calendar or to your reminder list and get a little alert when a conversation that is on a topic that you care about or a person that you are following closely is active on Clubhouse. So the calendar feature is really nice. So you can, so you're not having to quote unquote listen all of the time. You can see what's coming up ahead. And then stages. This is where you'll spend the most of your time when you're active within the app. So the stage is, it's really the actual room where a conversation is taking place. Pretend that you're, in a physical space. On the stage, you would have your moderator. If the moderator decides to bring guests up, they would then be on the stage. Everybody else is in the audience. If you're in the audience, you're in listen mode only. If you're on the stage, you have the ability to speak and interact. And so one of the things that's really interesting about Clubhouse is that you can jump from, room to room and be an observer the whole time. Or you can choose to, raise your hand and go up on the stage and interact. So it's very interesting. I'm going to geek out and share some Secret Kelly stuff, but I love screenwriters. Like, I'm fascinated by movies and television shows and how they're made. I've never done it in my life. I know nothing about it. I've never been in the industry, but I'm kind of fascinated. So I'm one of those lurkers that will join different clubhouses on, when it's featuring, like there was one the other night. It was all these different HBO series. So it had, some of the writers and producers from Sopranos and Entourage. And, so I was kind of there, just listening and observing, because it's something I've always been interested in, but don't know much about. And it was kind of cool being a fly on the wall, if you will, to hear the industry conversation about what was going on. So that's kind of fun. So you don't always have to join only those topic areas where you feel like you're an expert and you're there to contribute with actual content. The beauty of Clubhouse is you can learn new things. So it's kind of like a little, mini master's class, if you will, on topics that you're just curious about. In terms of uses, there's lots of different ways that we're seeing folks use the platform. So open discussions. If you're interested in just sparking a conversation, you're kind of curious about something, odds are you will find other groups, other folks active on the app that are interested in talking about the same thing too. Holding a live panel. So especially right now, when bringing folks together for large conferences or events, we're seeing a lot of live panels happening within the Clubhouse environment, where instead of it being a Zoom call, it's kind of a different format where you can bring people together to have a conversation. Networking, great place to network. There's a bunch of different rooms that have popped up. Like there's one it's called Saturday Night Dinner Party or something, where they'll just post a topic and you can just jump on and have a conversation with people that may not be in your network to get to know them and meet new people. You can conduct an interview. There have been a lot of very interesting uses of late where it'll be a well-known reporter from a national media outlet interviewing a very interesting guest. And so not only do you get to hear the interview live, but then later on you'll see what ultimately ends up in their story. So that's been a kind of fun use case. But also what has been interesting is some of these creators that I mentioned, who are not necessarily journalists, but they're creating a following and a space where they're bringing in different guests and interviewing them. And so the interview format I've really been enjoying. One of the things that the side notes that I'll mention in terms of these interviews is we're also seeing an interesting connection between social platforms. So when it's an interview setting, it tends to be, just the moderator or the interviewer plus the guest, or maybe a couple of guests. They don't typically invite people up on the stage to participate. Sometimes they do. But what I've seen quite a bit is that they'll ask people to post their questions to Twitter. And so they're using multiple platforms to kind of solicit feedback and engagement from the audience. So how Clubhouse will work with other platforms is definitely something to watch as well. We've seen folks create a podcast style chat. So in some cases, they'll be recording a podcast, they'll do it live on Clubhouse and then record it and publish it as a part of their podcast series that they have going in other forums. There's private chat rooms, as I mentioned. So if we all wanted to get together and have a private conversation, you could do that. Celebrities connecting with fans. There's been a lot of this happening where there'll be recording artist that's releasing a new song, and they'll play it for the first time on Clubhouse and get feedback live from fans. There'll be folks coming on talking about the release of a book or a movie. Folks like Oprah, who I don't know about you, but don't get to interact with someone like that every day, where she'll show up and she'll have conversation with folks that come into the Clubhouse. And then presentations. We are starting to see again that testing of business applications, the testing of how Clubhouse can be used in an academic setting. And so there has been some testing of how presentations and soliciting feedback can be used in an audio only type of platform. Next slide. So best practices. One of the first things that you're going to want to do is set up your account profile. And the account profile with Clubhouse is a little bit different than your profile with, say, a LinkedIn or a Facebook or an Instagram. The thing that's kind of fun about Clubhouse, well, I don't know if everyone will think it's fun, but one of the things that's unique to Clubhouse is it's not unusual for people to change their profile literally every time they're on the platform. So depending on the room that you're going into, you may end up changing your first 3 lines of your bio, because when the moderator is looking for folks to invite up on stage, that's all they can see, is the first 3 lines. So that becomes very important. And what we're finding is that people are customizing those first 3 lines based on the conversation in the room that they're in. If they are interested in asking a question, they might drop the question that they want to ask into their first 3 lines, so the moderator can see it. So it's been interesting to see how the account profile has been used to grab the attention of other people in the room. So the first 3 lines are the most important. Use searchable words and information near the top. It's kind of fun with this is that the emojis are also searchable. So you can squeeze a lot into those first 3 lines if you get creative with emojis, which is kind of fun. And the other thing is, if you are planning to host any conversations, or you're helping to promote upcoming conversations, including that upcoming room topic information within your profile is great, because when you're on or off the platform, if people discover you, they can see, look, I found Kelly. I heard her, make comments in this discussion the other day about tech in Montana. And look, there's a conversation that the Montana High Tech Business Alliance is hosting in 2 weeks about this topic. I'm going to put it on my calendar. I'd love to join. So get creative with how you're using that content in your bio. It's definitely being used in a lot of very cool ways. Oops. We're moving around. There we go. Photo, you want to make sure you have a nice, clean, visible photo, and one that's attention grabbing. In some cases, there'll be thousands of people in some of these rooms. And so, a very fuzzy shot where, you're this tiny and big doesn't necessarily get the same attention as one that, really stands out, is clear, an interesting, attention grabbing kind of background, something unique that kind of gives you personality. Building connections. So one of the other things to highlight is that within your bio, they don't allow to have a website listed or any kind of URL. And so one of the things that is important if you want to make sure that folks can get a hold of you is to include within your bio your Twitter handle, your Instagram, or some guidance in terms of how someone can find you. Because there's no other way at this stage to message someone within Clubhouse. So you can follow them, but there's no way to direct message within the app. Finally, the get notified. I want to call this out because it can be really annoying if you don't set this up when you first set up the app. It defaults to very frequent, which means, like what just happened, you could be sitting here, with friends on a call, whatever, and literally you will be getting Clubhouse updates constantly from everyone you follow. So you're really going to want to make sure and go in and set that frequency to whatever makes most sense for you. Next slide, Christina. All right. So best practices. When you get into the room, there's a couple different ways that you can participate. One is as a listener, but really the goal of Clubhouse is to participate. This is really about sparking conversation and having debate and dialogue and an interesting discussion. And so one of the things that, if it's on a topic that you really like and you want to continue to follow that topic, following the room, following the hosts, following the moderators, following the people who raise their hand and are up on stage and are speakers and participating in the conversation, that will help connect you and keep you informed of other things that you might be interested in. And so following is a great tool to kind of start to grow your kind of network within the app and to be guided to the content that's most relevant to your interests. Participate. It's fun. It's scary, but it's fun. So the first time, it's definitely like, oh my gosh, I'm hitting the raise my hand button, and then they call you up, and it's, again, the number of participants varies. So it can be 4 people, it can be 4,000 people. But do it, jump off, try. When you're a new user, there's a little icon that will appear by your photo that's kind of a little celebration icon. And that also is a great time to just raise your hand and play, because the moderators are very, they like to bring in folks that are new to the community. They know that you're just trying to figure it out. So it's the perfect time to just get in there and try it. So yeah, participate. It's really engaging once you do, and a little bit addicting. To speak, there's a little hand at the bottom. So if you are interested in joining the conversation, you just push that, and it's a virtual raise of your hand. You do want to do 2 things though. If you are brought up on stage, remember that it's a live mic. So you have to mute yourself when you're not saying something, if you raise your hand and the moderator brings you on stage. So there have been lots and lots and lots of very interesting examples of people who forget that. And so just note to self, hit mute when you're not speaking. Help grow the room. That's one of those things. If you're in a conversation and it's just like, oh my gosh, this would be so perfect. I know I do this to Christina all the time, where there'll be a conversation about a cool startup, or someone's talking about Montana and how amazing it is. I'll send her a little note to come join the room. And so yeah, your community is likely interested in some of the same topics that you are. So if you stumble upon a conversation where you want some of your friends and colleagues and folks in your networks to join, you just tap that little plus sign, and they can they'll be alerted to come join you. Finally, remember people. One of the things that I've enjoyed most about Clubhouse is the fact that it's huge, but it's small. Kind of like, Christina, what you were saying before we formally started the presentation, how, Montana, you were having how small Montana is moment. It's like that on Clubhouse. You'll start to stumble upon the same people. And, if you can be like, oh, hey, Joe, great to see you again. I totally remember, connecting with you in, this room on this conversation. People love that. And that's happening more and more as, as the Clubhouse community grows and there's more frequency of people joining conversations around the same topic. So definitely, I take little screenshots sometimes to remember why I followed somebody. And so, yeah, remembering people definitely makes a difference, and it's creating some nice connections within the platform. Next slide. So who are some noteworthy users? So I won't go through all of these, but there we go. It's going back and forth. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, there's a lot of celebrities that are popping up, and then there's some interesting people. So again, reporters are on there, so just know that sometimes there could be someone who's in the room to write a conversation. or to write a story based on the conversation. But there's also really interesting academics and authors and experts on different, topics, founders of different companies. And so it's a very eclectic, cool group of people. And then there's, like my neighbor. So there's all different types of people. You will find your community on here. And, again, hopefully all of us, since we have a common thread of being interested in tech in Montana, can create our own little slide like this of our own, where we can create a community and really be the ones driving the conversation on Clubhouse around the tech ecosystem here in our state. Next slide. So Clubhouse for Business. This is an area where it's still early days, but as somebody who thinks about communication and marketing all day, I'm fascinated by it, because what we're seeing is the use time of this platform is higher than most others. So if you're on Instagram, if you're on Twitter, these are engagements with your audience that are literally just, they're just happening, and there are a few seconds, and it's not a long dwell time, if you will. Users on the Clubhouse platform, if it's a topic they're interested, they're vested. I mean, they are listening to the conversation. In some cases, they're spending hours at a time on the platform, talking about different things, listening to different things, popping between different Clubhouse conversations that are going on. So I'm really watching this space close to see how it evolves. But I think what we're going to see is engagement levels on this app that are just drastically different than what we're seeing on some of the other social platforms. So from a business perspective, that's quite intriguing. The other thing that's very interesting is that, again, as I mentioned, even though recording is not necessarily approved in the terms and conditions, we are seeing follow-on content result from Clubhouse conversations. So folks are recording it and reposting it. In some cases, they're participating, maybe recording it for their own use and turning it into an article. In some cases, they're participating in a conversation and then going onto YouTube and posting a video around their experience in this conversation. So there definitely is a long tail here of content. So again, from a business perspective, I'm very closely watching this space to figure out how that evolves, because it seems like it's going to be a medium where you kind of spark a dialogue here, and then it can turn into other conversations. So that engagement level is really, really interesting. There has, as I mentioned before, there's been speculation about how Clubhouse will evolve to handle accounts for brands. There's a pilot going on with the influencers that I mentioned, but one thing that was also just recently announced is that there's a pilot for sponsorships. So this wouldn't be necessarily like a straight up ad or something that runs before a conversation gets started, but maybe it will be a conversation on pick your favorite topic, brought to you by and a speaker from that company or brand would kick it off. Perhaps there will be an influencer who decides to do a Q&A or an interview style Clubhouse conversation with an executive from a particular brand. So they're playing with that right now to kind of see how it evolves. But again, I do think that there is going to be a business application here, networking, of course, but even from an awareness, thought leadership, driving an industry conversation, definitely some interesting uses to come. If we go to the next slide. So things to keep in mind for executives. It's really things to keep in mind for all of us, but for those of us who may work for companies where your CEO is interested in getting on here and playing around, or one of your senior executives, or if you work for a company that's publicly traded, these are things that you do want to keep in mind. They're general rules for all of us, but particularly when you're working for a company where you don't want the the president or the CEO to get caught in a difficult situation, or you're a publicly traded company and you don't want to say something out of turn. These are really good tips to just have in your back pocket. So, Clubhouse is one of those things where it's not scripted and anything goes. If it's a public room, anyone can join. So you do need to be prepared, whether it's yourself or someone in your company that that is going on to Clubhouse. You could get asked questions that you don't want to answer. And so just be prepared for that. In some cases, there have been, I haven't seen it a ton, but there have been a few Clubhouses that I've been in where, the person asking the question is just like, won't let it go. And so having a really strong moderator that can tactfully take someone off the stage if they're not moving on is really, really helpful. So making sure that you're aware of who the moderator is, if it is somebody that you're concerned about within your business, that you don't want to have them get into a tricky situation, knowing the moderator is important as well. There are still privacy concerns about the app because it's on your phone. It does, when you download the app, it does give the app access to all of the contacts in your phone book. On the positive side, if somebody else joins Clubhouse and has you in their contacts and you have them, it'll recommend that you connect. So in terms of finding people, it's useful, but it's something that you do. You just go in eyes wide open because they are still working through some of the privacy parameters for the app. And again, it's a pilot, so just know that going in. And finally, the experience will only be as good as a moderator. If you're looking at this from a business perspective, the moderator is key. So definitely make sure that you are not just jumping in and going with any old moderator, but that you have some familiarity with them, or you have done at least a little bit of homework to know that this is going to be the kind of conversation you want to be a part of if you're using it for a business perspective and suggesting it to one of your leadership team members. Next slide. Competition. So as I mentioned, this is a space that's definitely one to watch. Facebook is already starting to dabble in this area, Twitter as well, with a new feature that they have called Spaces. The one that I'm really watching closely is coming out from Mark Cuban. So he has an app that's set to launch later this year called Fireside. Some of you may remember that Mark Cuban, in the early days, when he first got onto the scene, launched broadcast.com, which was ultimately purchased by Yahoo. And so this space is very familiar to him. Broadcast.com was like the early days of what some of this is becoming. And so Fireside, I think, is also one to watch. They're also really looking at how analytics and AI can play into the app. And so this is one that I think that could be a Clubhouse, a definite Clubhouse competitor to reckon with. So watch that space. It should be coming out later this year. Next slide. I've already touched a little bit on the Clubhouse for Creators program. If any of you are creators, definitely worth following this space closely. As I mentioned before, we've seen how YouTube, we've seen how Instagram and other social platforms have emerged as a revenue vehicle for folks who create content. Clubhouse is very much looking like it has that potential as well. So there's a test period going on right now, but follow what some of the bigger name influencers are doing on the platform. Watch, observe, and I would imagine shortly they're going to continue, start to expand this. So it'll be really interesting to see where this goes. And it's important because there are so many people that are blogging full-time, that are podcasting full-time. And so as these platforms start to come together, I think we'll see some really interesting connections and dynamics. So if you are a creator, I think Clubhouse is really, really good news. next slide. So with that, we have about 15 minutes. I don't know that that's necessarily enough time for us to like pop over to the app, but we could give it a try if we wanted to. First, why don't we get into the chat here? So we have a couple things. Oh, okay, great. So John, John had a question about setting up an account. When you download the app, it'll ask you to set up a username. That's step one, just to kind of save your name, if you will. The app is still invite only. So a second part of that is to get the invitation. So Martina or Christina,
I believe we got John all set up.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we sent the invite. So, but if anybody else or somebody has, if you've used up your invites and you have friends, we can
help.
Them.
We can help. Great. Discord is launching a similar concept to Clubhouse. Steve, I don't know if you have any more details on that. I don't know much about that, but I would love to hear.
Yeah, it's really preliminary right now. It's I don't know how familiar Discord is to everyone. It's basically a gaming version of Slack with audio channels, but they're tweaking some of their audio channels to be more like that Clubhouse format where you can have this kind of speaker and moderator and people listening in. So.
Yes, another one to add to the list. Has anyone had the experience of going around and playing on Clubhouse yet? Initial thoughts on what you've seen?
I guess my only initial thoughts, so you're exactly right. The amount of notifications you can get if you don't set your settings correctly is a little overwhelming. I'm finding right now that it's a very urban-centric, is I guess how I would describe it, urban-centric platform. There's just not a lot of stuff relevant to me in rural Montana right now. Interesting topics, no doubt. Just kind of outside the scope of what I usually talk about with folks.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation today. I think many of us miss the days of being able to get together for the High Tech Business Alliance mixers and events in person. And as our state is so vast, and so meeting up definitely takes that extra effort. Clubhouse, we want to experiment with the Alliance to see if it is a place where we can convene and get together and talk about things that are relevant to tech in Montana, or all things Montana. And so would love to kind of gauge if this group and others would be interested in something like that. We love the idea of these webinars that we've been doing and kind of the casual conversations via Zoom. But Clubhouse is different and more casual, if you will. And so we're thinking that there could be some there if there's interest. So yeah, I would agree. A lot of the topics now are not necessarily with all roads pointing to Montana, but it's certainly a place where we can carve out our own little, piece of the world to have fun discussion.
Yep, I agree.
Yes, Kelly, it's John. Yeah. So I'm wondering, just with 10 million users now, how well developed are the various what we refer to as business verticals? Okay. Versus, more or less conversational.
Yeah, it's my observation, and would love to hear from others if you have perspective as well. But my observation is that it's still early days. That I see a lot more content around around kind of pop culture general topics than around specific business niches. There is as I mentioned earlier, real estate, for whatever reason, they are definitely running to this platform, and there's a lot happening on real estate, from communities for new agents to marketing tips for realtors, to networking forums, to opportunities for realtors to engage with, buyers that are looking at different markets, to, selling advice. So real estate, for whatever reason, has taken off. Tech, there's a lot of conversation around tech, not necessarily tech in Montana only, but tech just simply by nature of the app being, invite only at first. It was a lot of startups, a lot of VCs, a lot of folks kind of within the tech community that joined initially. So there are some tech conversations. There's a few great, if you're following cloud in general, a few great clubs that have popped up that specifically focus on cloud, whether you're looking at it from a business perspective or want to geek out and get very technical with other developers. So that's an area where there's been a lot of action, if you will. But it's early days. So I think any of us with an idea and a desire to talk, to spark conversation with others around a particular topic, game on. Go create your own little forum. So Liz, I think you've played a little bit around on it. Is there anybody else that has thoughts on their experiences or questions about the platform?
Well, it's Mary. I have lots of questions. Thoughts, I've only had probably close to 60 seconds to look at it. I downloaded it and just took a look at it and figured out how to change the frequency setting, and that was about it. So I'm looking forward to playing with it.
Yeah, definitely. And and that's what it's all about. It's really about getting on there and playing with it. And one of the things, Christina, maybe that we could also do is, share, initially some of the, there's some standing conversations. So like every Monday night, for example, if you're interested in kind of the startup world or, leadership lessons from founders, there's a regular session on Monday nights that Andreessen Horowitz, so Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz host. That's really well done and very well kind of curated, if you will. And every week it focuses on different topics. 1 week it'll be, kind of lessons from founders. The next week it'll be, investment in markets outside of the usual suspect places. So it's like they bring together folks talking about investment in Montana or Ohio or, Tennessee. And so there's some conversations that in that one that I think could be very relevant and interesting to this group, just given the common thread of tech. And it has been fun to see a few folks pop on there and talk about tech in Montana. So
Kelly, how would we search and find that?
So there is
search for?
Yeah. So if you follow Mark Andreessen, and it doesn't say Mark Andreessen, it says Mark. Let's see. Some people are using names that don't make it super easy to find them. I will find Mark while we're talking here. But yeah, if you follow Mark or if you follow Ben Horowitz.
Kelly, if we connect with you, would we be able to follow it through your account?
Yeah, so Ben is easier to find. Or if you follow me, I'm following both Mark and Ben, but Mark has kind of a code. I think it's like Mark A or something, or Mark. Ben Horowitz is this Ben Horowitz. So if you follow them, you'll get an alert anytime that they do host a conversation. And they're interesting to follow too, because they're investors in Clubhouse. And so they're popping up in all different kinds of forums. That's how I discovered the one that I mentioned earlier about the screenwriters and on the, from the HBO series, which was kind of a fun one. Yeah, but if I think, just there's two things. One, you can use the search function and just enter in words, keywords that you're interested in, or find people. that you want to connect with, and just check out who they're following. That's another great place to start initially.
I don't think I got the right Ben Horowitz, because I put in Ben Horowitz and I got somebody with only 154 followers who
That's
joined
probably not
February
Ben.
7th.
Yeah. So here.
No, he has 3.9 million.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
should
I
say
don't think it's the right
Andreessen
one.
Horowitz under.
Yeah. So his user is BEN
Mhm.
TONIO, Bentonio. So at Bentonio.
Ah,
Ooh, Martina just found Mark Andreessen. It's PMARCA.
Yeah. See, not intuitive.
And we
Not
can
one of
also
those.
send out a list of some of these profiles when we send out the recording of the webinar.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, there's some interesting folks that I think we can curate if you're interested in all things tech.
Kelly, this may be a technical question, but is basically, once you start getting involved in the conversations, is there a robot or an algorithm running in the background offering you suggestions for groups and things like that?
So I don't know the answer to that. There very well could be. I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that they're customizing what's suggested to me based on the rooms that I'm in. It feels like it's based on who I'm following, that they'll recommend other people. But I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, definitely something for us to kind of figure out as this goes along. So I don't know how they're recommending, but it feels like it's more based on who I'm following and what clubs I'm joining versus the rooms that I'm in. But I could be wrong. Yeah, I could be wrong. So any other questions while we're all together? No? Okay.
We're also topics. So if anybody wants to message us or email us with ideas for one thing I'm thinking about, I guess kind of related to our Montana is a small world conversation, but earlier today had a conversation about remote workers. So those who are like working individually for a company from Montana, not necessarily like all of us working remotely, regardless of where we work right now, but for those who are sort of solo in Montana, like that we could use more opportunities to connect folks and talk about how to create community or particularly, unique challenges that you face. You're working remotely or working in a rural.
Yeah, definitely. If there are topics that you guys would love to see, the Alliance host a Clubhouse on, please do make those suggestions. And again, the beauty of Clubhouse is that any one of us can go on there and start a conversation immediately. So if you do go on there and you're like, it's Tuesday afternoon and I'm interested in chatting with some folks about this, don't hesitate to ping us. I love Clubhouse, and so if I'm available, I'd love to pop on a little impromptu chat about something. So don't feel like you have to wait for others to lead a conversation. Play with it and try it yourself too, for sure.
Well, hopefully this is the beginning.
Yes.
Of our new forays into Clubhouse. Reminder to everybody that we will be sending out a link to the video if you want to rewatch and remind yourself of the tips and the opportunities within Clubhouse. And we'll also share a list of recommendations for people to follow and groups that you might be interested in if you're into tech and business. Anything else you'd add, Kelly, before we wrap up?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is you all have homework. So download the app if you have an iPhone, work on that profile, get that profile set up. And don't be afraid to experiment, but we'll definitely carve out some time and set up a little test room if you want to start in a safe environment with all of us. We'll set up a little test room so we can continue the dialogue in the app. So with that, thanks again for joining us for a fun little detour to chat about Clubhouse on a Thursday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Kelly.